Welcome to Inspire Saratoga, a show that highlights the people and stories that make our home a place of strength, inspiration, and success. I'm Michael Kurkowski, physical and mental performance coach and resident of Saratoga Springs. And in this show, my mission is to connect with the great people who also call this place home, hear about their work and what they do for this town, and share their insights and experiences in health, wealth, and happiness for you, my neighbors. Thank you for joining me wherever you are in town. Let's dive in. All right. Welcome, everybody. Francine Apy, welcome to Inspire Saratoga.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Been a long time coming. I know we've had a couple different ones on my fault, but I'm really excited to have you on and dive into everything that you're doing.
All good.
Yeah,
We made it.
exactly. Yeah. So I always like to ask about the time in Saratoga. Are you from this area, or how'd you come to Saratoga Springs?
Sure. So no, I'm not originally from the area. We've been here about since 2011, so quite some time. But we had an opportunity to relocate here. We could choose any location within upstate New York, based on our work, and we chose Saratoga. It really is such a beautiful community. It was important for us to have a downtown area
Okay.
and proximity to, New York and Boston and certainly the Adirondacks and Lake Placid. So, yeah, it's been great. Not from here, but this is the longest place we've ever lived. So, um,
Okay.
as
What
a,
was
as a
what was
family.
it about the town? I mean, there's some good metrics like downtown and stuff. Was there a specific feel versus some other, places in the areas upstate?
It's funny when you really think about, because we've lived in Buffalo, we've lived in Syracuse, we were downstate in Warwick and Hopewell Junction. But there's not a lot of places in New York State that truly have a mainstream still and a
Yeah.
Broadway, a thriving Main Street in downtown. And that was really important to us. That's what attracted us to Warwick, New York, which is a little bit more of a farm town and but they had a main street, and in Orchard Park outside of Buffalo we were drawn there because as opposed to somewhere else in Buffalo because it truly had a downtown. So Saratoga by far has the most thriving downtown that we've witnessed in New York State. I could be challenged on that, but
Sure.
I don't know another um, town or city, small city in New York State that has all that Saratoga has to offer, from, stores to the arts to great schools. It really kind of touched on so many things for us.
Yeah, I always like talking about it when I come on this show because, I've lived here for 7 years. I'm from Niskuna, so not too far, but like any place you can get so normalized to it that you don't recognize the like this is not a common thing in a lot. I remember in Niskuna, there's no main area, like no main specific hub spot where I was just walking on downtown yesterday and I was like, man, like it's there's just a little hustle bustle if you want it, or you can get away and have the quietness and the quaintness from there. Not every place has that. So I think anybody who's from this area, stop and look around every once in a while because you can
Yeah,
miss it.
we're definitely spoiled. And, as silly as it may sound, one of the things that really attracted to us was that you could go to the post office, that you're seeing similar faces on an ongoing basis because you're all drawn to one main area, right?
Yeah.
And there's a sense of community when you relocate to the area that you can more readily make those connections because we're all coming to a central place.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I like to ask because everybody who's not from this area or maybe just knows it vaguely, knows the track, maybe Battle Saratoga. There's some historical, reverence, to it. But is there any specific place or specific thing in this town that you find really powerful or really exciting? Of maybe somebody who's never been here before, you would bring that up as something to go check out.
I just think the number of hiking trails, like within minutes, is really incredible. Within a 5 to 10 minute drive, whether you go to SPAC or you go to Geyser Falls or you go, any at the edge of Greenfield, there's just so many quick and easy access to outdoor biking and walking or running.
Mm.
I tend to like to walk a lot. And I think not having to drive a great distance for variety is really just so great.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to get into the work that you do. So soul-filling adoption. It was cool. We got the chance to connect a little while ago, and you told me all about it. Fortunately, forgot a lot about it, so I'm excited to remember more about it. But what is soul-filling adoption, and what is the mission that you're aiming to do with the business that you're working with?
Sure. So SoulFilling is the name of my company. And basically, Michael, my mission is to help make the conversation of adoption more mainstream at home, work, and school, and to educate and to really elevate the adoption conversation in 2025. It's much more balanced, it's much more modern. And I really feel that adoption has just evolved so much over the last several decades. And I don't believe that media has kept up with that evolution and allowed us to continue this newer conversation, as I like to say. Join me in sparking a new adoption conversation.
Mhm.
So, long story short, my background is in HR leadership, which I did for 25 years, and I loved it. A lot of coaching, a lot of performance management, a lot of, human development. So that essence of growth was something that I always felt very comfortable with. And my husband and I had been blessed with three children through adoption. Our middle son just turned 21 yesterday, so we had a nice hibachi celebration for him. But adoption has been in my family for over 30 years. So there's 11 grandchildren, eight of which came to our family through the blessing of adoption.
Wow.
And all of our families, birth families, our children, our extended family, we have a lot of really amazing stories to share. And I think sometimes we get stuck in older narratives or narratives that are outdated of secrecy, or we don't talk about it, or they didn't know that they were adopted, or records not being available and open to an adoptee. And so I just really felt um, that it was a great opportunity for me to kind of take my HR background of coaching and leadership and education and public speaking that I felt very comfortable with, and then my personal passion and foundation of a lived experience of
Mhm.
adoption and kind of marry them both and created Soul Filling.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, this is a very personal. Eight kids of the 11 come from
Yes.
adoption.
So three are our sons. We have three sons,
Yep.
23, 21, and 18. And then my nieces and nephews this year actually turned 30. So that's why we can say over 30 years
Yeah,
of
okay.
adoption in our family. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask about the evolution of the conversation around adoption, but with starting a business like you took a personal experience and then turned it into a business to service others. How long was this an idea in your mind? Was this something that was always kind of in the back of the mind when you were working in HR of something you maybe wanted to do as a passion project? And when did you eventually want to, all right, now this is the time I want to jump in and really make this a business to help other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes I forget to reflect on that. Honestly, I think it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to give back to the adoption community in some way, because obviously adoption has been such an incredible, just an important, incredible part of my life. And it was a couple years ago, actually, a dear friend of mine who happens to be an adoptee. It was her birthday, and I said, "Happy birthday." And she said, "Thank you, my soul-filling friend, Fran." So
Oh, wow. I
all
love that. Yeah.
disclosure, um, it was her fault. Her name is Deirdre, and it was Deirdre's fault if we were going to paint blame. um, that she and I said, "Soul filling." I said, "Where did that word come from?" You hear soulful music and soulful food, or you hear fulfilling. I'm having a very fulfilling,
Sure.
career. But soul filling, there was something of a deeper level of that word that really sparked just this whole stirring in me, quite honestly. And so, full disclosure, it was going to be a greeting card company. It was going to be Soul Filling Sentiments. I love
Okay.
photography and I was going to marry this, my photography with these really soul-filling sentiments of inspiring people in a greeting card. And then I sat with that for about 6 months and sold some greeting cards. And I was like, Fran, this is bigger than a greeting card company. This is much deeper. And that's where soul filling was actually um, founded, established. So I did what you do, I Googled how to start a
Yep.
business.
Okay.
I was a part owner of a business in my last, before, I kind of hung my hat in HR, but I never did all the things, right? I was part of a bigger team. And
Hmm.
so I needed some guidance. So I Googled start a business. So it said, come up
It's a
with a
good start.
logo,
Yep.
so I went back to some of the people that I worked in my professional environment, a graphic artist, designer, Gina. She helped me create my logo, which I'm happy to say that was just an approved registered trademark last month. It took about a year for that to
Okay.
go through, but it is an official registered logo. I created my mission statement, my vision statement. I built a website and really began to think about what value can I bring to those in the adoption space. And I really landed on writing. So I wrote a children's book,
Yep.
Brianna's Brave Day at School. Again, keeping in the forefront that my mission was to help bring the conversation of adoption more mainstream at home, work, and school in casual conversation kind of ways, I talk a lot, Michael, about life is serious, having children is serious, but every conversation, adoption can be serious, but every conversation doesn't need to be serious. And I think one of the ways we can feel more comfortable talking about topics that we maybe don't know a lot about, or maybe we have mixed emotions and feelings about it, is to bring it about in more casual ways. And
Hmm.
how can we do that? Well, writing a children's book and having a book to read to a child that incorporates adoption. It's actually this book is actually based on an actual event that happened to my now 21-year-old when he was in 8th grade at St. Clement's School.
Okay.
And that story stuck with me that I thought that could be my educational piece into the classroom, so to
Mhm.
educate on home, work, and school. Within the workplace, I have an opportunity to speak to an HR person later this month about bringing into the workplace, benefits that surround and are more sensitive to families needing maybe time off, through their adoption process, or maybe some extra financial assistance. Adoption can be very expensive,
Mhm.
so offering additional benefits. So bringing it to the workplace that way can also be helpful. And then from an individual standpoint, really just sparking those conversations, like for example, this journal that I recently wrote, an adoption journey in words and photos, right? So it gives a person the opportunity, whether they're a birth mom, an adoptive mom, or an adoptee, to really reflect around their adoption journey. Give them that opportunity to think about, where did my story begin? Where am I now in my story? And where do I, as the author of my story, want to take the next chapter?
Mhm.
So things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a beautiful frame. I got to harp on this because I'm a word nerd. When you said soul filling, I love the difference of that from soulful because when you think of the process of mastery and in life, we're always expanding, it's always evolving. So soulful can have an idea that it's done and it's complete, where soul filling is no, it's a never-ending process that it keeps filling up over and over. So there's probably nobody else is going to think of this stuff, but this is the process of how I aim.
And I'm so glad you said that because I usually follow up with there was something about the word that it was so continuous
Hmm.
and it was on, it was going on into, and forever.
Yeah.
And I love that aspect of it. There wasn't a finite aspect to it, which I think is what we're all called to do here, right?
Yeah.
Keep exploring and growing
That's
and
it.
evolving.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you mentioned the evolution of conversation, and I love that the mission you said is really about having a conversation around this. How have you seen this conversation specifically about adoption, maybe from the adopted parents or birth parents, however that like comes? How have you seen it evolve from the time when this was a personal experience to now even, working with people and coaching people through this process?
Sure. So, long story short, the history of adoption, I'm just going to put it out there, is not at the happiest story, right? Not at the happiest beginnings. It was a place of secrecy. It was a place of closed records. It was a place of we don't talk about it. There was a lot of shame, right? Birth moms, often gave birth to their child in private, far away. I'm talking 50, 60, 70 years ago, right? In private and weren't able to hold the child and they didn't even know where the child was placed for adoption. There was a lot of secrecy, there was a lot of shame, and there was clearly not openness around it, right? Now, fast forward to 2025, the adoption process has evolved so much, quite honestly, to adopt today in 2025 and not have some level of openness is practically unheard of. So when
Really?
I say that is most birth moms today are choosing the family, who are going to parent the child that they're carrying. And between conversations with a birth mother and an adoptive family, they come up with what makes most sense level of openness. Is it letters throughout, a few times a year, letters and pictures? Is it a visit once a year? Is it more of an ongoing visit on a quarterly basis? It's really coming up with what makes most sense for the family of the birth family as well as the adoptive family, and ultimately, obviously, what's in the best interest of the child as well.
Mhm.
So the openness around it and the openness around, the individual, the adoptee, knowing from birth that they have adoption in their story, that they were adopted, and that they're not finding this out much later in life.
Mhm.
You know, I truly believe that when we operate from this place of secrecy and shame, it's often in fear, right? It's in fear of the unknown. It's in fear of not knowing what to do, so you don't do anything, or maybe you do the wrong thing, and so this conversation of adoption has, for those touched by adoption, we're very close to it
Mhm.
because we read more around adoption, right? And we
Sure.
have
Yep.
adoption in our stories. And, I have my son's birth families. And so, at the end of the day, if you're not personally touched by adoption, you may not be as knowledgeable around adoption, right? So, if, for example, you never met anyone, Michael, who was adopted, but you just saw some Hallmark movie or some
Right.
tabloid from 25, 30 years ago, or you heard about an awful adoption experience, that's your association with adoption,
Of
right?
course. Mhm.
If
Yep.
you don't have that opportunity to talk to somebody who's had a positive experience around adoption, or as I say, a more modern adoption experience today. And so that's really important to me to help to improve those narratives, like um, for those who are raising their families through adoption, but also to educate those that who may be, touching those who are
Mhm.
impacted, by adoption.
Yeah. When did you start to see it shift? I'm kind of curious about like why it was such a closed off thing. I can speculate on it, but again, I'll just be speaking from ignorance. But it went from more of like a very closeted, very closed, thing where we don't talk about this, and it was probably very subjective to the individual. When did you, is there a specific time when things started to shift in the conversation? Is it more recent? Is this a little while ago? What was that process like?
Well, it's definitely improved for the better from 30 years ago to today,
Yeah.
right? So 30 years ago to today, if you meet somebody within that time frame, They probably know that they were adopted. They know some things about their birth families. All the adoption records are now open. So original birth certificates, those sorts of access. DNA testing, Michael, has been huge with people doing more
Okay.
DNA testing and names and things coming up, of connections and being able to, dial back into more of their biological history. But really, prior to that, you know, having a child was like something that a woman, that's what we were designed to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And imagine, 60 plus years ago, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, if you couldn't do that,
Yeah.
there was a lot of shame
100.
associated
Yeah,
with
I can see
that.
that.
I'm trying to hone it into something that can maybe really resonate, because I could talk about this for a very long time.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
just from the essence of a woman who was designed to have a child, couldn't have a child. Um, and imagine a world, 70, 80 plus years ago, that we weren't this culture of mental health in conversation and exploration and openness to therapy and openness to talking about what's troubling to us and challenging to us, right? It was
Right.
more of like keep it all inside and then try to fix it, right?
Hmm.
And so I think, all of that the time period was very 70, 80 years
Sure.
here. We're not the openness that we have today around it, and the
Right.
ability, it didn't have the resources and the tools to talk about the struggles, right, of
Yeah.
infertility, which of course, are talked about much more now as well.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, obviously things in so many different facets have changed in, half a century of going in. But yeah, like I'm even remembering like when I was in grammar school, which is, late 80s, early 90s and stuff. A lot of stuff we didn't even just talk about anything as kids. You kind of just like it was very much more of like a closed conversation type thing, where now it seems like everything is a lot more, open, not just open like spilling everything out, but just being like okay with saying this is exactly who I am with it.
Yeah,
And I think that's a beautiful thing.
and accepting, and then with all, one of the big things that I'm trying so hard to do in my work is to bring a voice to the entire adoption triad: birth mom, adoptee, and adoptive mom.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, people are kind of tired of hearing from the adoptive mom. She has had a voice for a long time, and she's had
Oh,
this, she's been the person that was able to become a mom, a parent, because of the blessing of an adoptive mom, But years ago, the excuse me, birth mom. Years ago, the birth mom, if you can imagine the shame around, right? Be getting pregnant
right.
and not being married possibly, and what was brought around that, and what the expectations were for that person, that they could not raise that child by themselves, and they
Yeah. You
couldn't,
you even
that they
mentioned when we
had to place the child for adoption.
right, you even mentioned when we chatted before of even just using the phrase of giving up your child was like
Yes,
the
you
common thing.
remember that
Yeah.
language is really important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the two main ones that I talk about is, right, that a birth mother chose an adoption plan, right, for their
Hmm.
child. They didn't give their child away. They chose an plan. They chose, that they were not able to parent their child the way that they wanted to parent. And
Hmm.
and and then the other important um, one that we talk a lot about, which I just escaped me, but I'll come back to it. But that importance of giving up. Oh, and birth mom, real parents. Who are your real parents? No, there are
Right.
birth parent, we're both very real. An
Mhm.
adoptive mom and a birth mom are both very real. So your birth family, your adoptive family,
Yeah.
as opposed to who are your real parents, who,
Yeah. I think it's powerful. I mean, the words that we use matter so much in the work that I do with, people in performance and physical strength. We talk about it all the time. Like the words you say inside your head matter so much. So the words that you're speaking out and the messages out there, like, yeah, maybe it's just like common vernacular. It doesn't mean it's necessarily right. And those things can, specifically for a young child on that, hearing that, like, you don't know how that's going to impact them and how, to move them on. The conversations that you're having with people now, like as a coach, because you work with people of kind of getting them into the practice, what are the common questions or common struggles that a lot of moms, a lot of adopted parents are coming to you with? Like, what are the main questions that they're usually asking when they want to get into this process?
One of the things that I'm really focusing on more so now, right now, as opposed to the one-on-one coaching, and the coaching will come, quite
Uh-huh.
honestly, but it's more on the educational side of things. So, for example, I have a relationship with the Center for Adoption Support and Education.
Okay.
They're out of Maryland, Baltimore, and they have a couple locations there. But CASE, which is their acronym, they actually wrote the curriculum for adoption competent therapists. So 25 years. This year they celebrate 25 years. So up until 25 years ago, there was no extra training that a therapist could obtain that helped them better serve the adoption community. So, for example, I'm a true believer in therapy. I think therapists are a wonderful, amazing resource for us all to tap into when we need to get through different pieces of our journey. And I believed it for my children as well. And I mentioned to you we moved several times, and every time we moved, I would try to find, the dentist, the pediatrician, the chiropractor, and then a therapist. And I always wanted to kind of find that talking doctor, as I explained to my kids,
Hmm.
before we really needed them, right? I kind of wanted them in our back pocket. And it never ceased to amaze me that over the, more than 25 years of finding someone every time I went to talk to someone, only one time a therapist said, I've never had any formal training, but I have some clients who are adopted.
Hmm.
So maybe I could, help you out.
Right.
That was shocking to me. I mean, today in 2025, there are over 5 million adoptees in the US. Over 5 million. That's not a
Wow.
small number.
Yeah.
Of course, you can imagine it's hard to get an exact number, but
Hmm.
over 5 million adoptees in the US. And when you think about the number of those people that those adoptees have touched, from birth family to adoptive family to teachers to coaches to coworkers to doctors. I mean, how many times I brought my kids to the doctors? We were very open that adoption's part of our story from a medical history standpoint, that there was never any formal training to provide to mental health professionals prior to 25 years ago. In this organization CASE, the Center for Adoption Support and Education, wrote the curriculum. And now that curriculum is taught, I believe they're in 30 therapists in 33 different states, because the therapists can take that training remotely, virtual,
Okay. Yep.
and they can get certified to become adoption competent therapists. So that if a client comes into their office and has adoption in their story, there's a certain, protocol that you kind of
Mhm.
want to go through, and a certain understanding and education you want to understand when you're working with someone that has adoption in their story.
Yeah.
So to me, the educational side is fascinating, of educating people. So they've asked me to do a workshop, actually it's a webinar in September on what I like to talk about is positive psychology within the adoption space, and coming from a growth mindset, and the power of resiliency and the power of choice within our story. So,
Mhm.
whereas the Center for Adoption Support and Education, they're really focused on the mental health aspect. And there's certainly, obviously appropriate um, a time and a place for a therapist. But then for myself, more so as an adoption mindset coach,
Sure.
that I can bring in the power of resiliency and the power of growth mindset and the power of what we choose to put in our minds, right? The stories that we tell ourselves. And so I'm educating and bringing that concept to their community. So it's going to be offered as a webinar to their community.
Yeah.
SUNY has also asked me to do a 1 day, half-day workshop to, it could be for local people here in the capital region, or they can stream in live, via Zoom and just really begin to learn about what does it mean to adopt today in 2025.
Mhm.
And I'll just take them through that process and give them food for thought and give them the different tools and resources they may want to bring into their toolbox while they begin their journey, or if they're in the middle of their journey, some of the things that they may want to consider to help them along their way.
That's beautiful. I love it. What are some of the like key things, talking about mindset and kind of resilience is like like a subset of mindset. What are some of the key things to like having a growth mindset in the context of kind of going into the journey of adoption that you're speaking about?
I think like with anything, Michael, it's so important that individuals, and this could be, and I'm working on another book, that we're more alike than different, whether you have adoption in your story or not.
Okay.
Um,
You
but
know
to
how much I
really,
resonate with that, so thank you for bringing that
pardon
up.
me.
Yes, you know how much I resonate with that, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, but it's the truth. We are more alike than different, and we have this choice to choose to focus on the little bit that we're different or the vastness of what we're more alike, right?
Right.
And so I think whether you're choosing to have a family yourselves, give birth to a child and have a family, is the same in this regard to if you're considering adoption. You have to really be grounded in yourself. You have to know who you are and why it is you want to have a family. You
Right.
know, is it could be 100 different reasons. So I say that because, you know, having a family is not for the lighthearted,
Faint of heart. Yes.
faint of heart. Yeah, thank you. It's not. You have to have thick skin. You have to have a certain element of confidence. You have to have this willingness to put yourself second, third, or fourth in the journey.
Mhm.
And in adoption, um, gosh, I just, I can't stress it enough that you just have to go into it with this open mind and confidence that you are so not in control of so much of the journey. And you have to be open to the possibility that anything could really happen at any time.
Yeah.
And it can be exhausting and it could be very challenging and it can be very trying. And it can be the most beautiful thing that you've ever, in adoption. I love this. We talk a lot about and both, right? It's not either or, it's and both.
Hmm.
In starting a family is and both. It can be the most beautiful, the most rewarding, the some of the best days of your life, and it could be some of the hardest, most challenging,
Sure.
difficult days of your life. And going into adoption, for a person who is starting the adoption process, if they're anything like me, give me a problem, I'm going to come up with a solution,
Mhm.
right? You got a problem? I got a solution. Well, adoption doesn't work that way. Becoming a
Right.
parent doesn't work that way. And I really had to take the hands off the wheel, right? And thank goodness I am a very strong person of faith because that's where I put all my energy because there's so much we don't have control over. So how am I gonna answer your question? Because I don't know if I answered your
I
question.
love it. There's so many threads I want to pull on this, Francine. Kind
Okay.
of in the Taoist perspective, it's a very yang quality that we have of like the takeover and focus on, kind of control everything. But this is a very yin-based thing where you need to go with that flow a lot more. And I love what you said about the positive psychology and there's an aspect of just individual human nature in this because we have a negativity bias of always looking at
Why is that? How do we
Well,
move that?
well, it's because we look at differences because our brain is built for survival, not for growth. Like we're looking at things as threats all the time. So if something is the same or if something is positive, it's a lot easier to put that in hazy letters and overlook it. Where if something is very negative or something is different, that could be perceived biologically as a threat. So you're going to look at that a little bit more with a possible standoffish or quizzical look from there. It's so you can't fight the biology on this, but you can recognize it more and move off of it. I see this all the time in work with, anybody that's in a personal development stage. But what was coming to my mind is I have to tell a personal story on this because when I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia and went through the journey of being, a kid, pediatric, oncology. And I actually just spoke to my parents about this of what was their time like because I was 3 years old. I don't have any, an intellectual perspective on it. I just kind of knew this is what we do. We go to we go there and I get a lollipop after they do a spinal tap. But I asked my mom about it of just the conversations with friends and was that different? And lost some friends and some people who didn't really know how to deal with my
Mm,
mom at that time. And, everybody kind of gives their idea of what you should do in this. And, oh, you need to take care of yourself. You need to go out. When my mom's like, fuck off. Like, I am so like focused on my child right now and making sure. And
please
you
don't
don't
tell me
know.
what I need to do now.
And I can see that in this realm as well. It's a different, journey, but it's kind of similar paths on here
Mm.
is if something is different than the normalized, and what the hell is normal anyway, but some other people are just not going to know how to deal with that from their own traditional values or what they think that's going on. And to build a thick skin on that and to know how to kind of roll with that because you're probably not always going to get the right response or the response you would hope for from other external things around you when dealing with this. So having that good conversation inward with your own family and then probably having some outlets as well that you can come is a really powerful thing that you need to cultivate and build within this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a great, just thank you for sharing that story. I had forgotten you did touch on that with me, and that is just so true. But I think we're designed to solve things and to fix things and
Mhm.
make things right. And it's this desire, which I think is a healthy thing, right? That's how we survive, is
Right.
because we can have the process to think through things and come up with solutions. But there comes a time that that doesn't serve us any longer. In pushing and pushing and pushing and trying, um, doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
And it's in that letting go, in the power of allowing the unexpected to happen,
Mhm.
right? Allowing for something that you couldn't even possibly have thought of to occur, that it gives you this sense of relief of like, okay, now I'm open to the possibility of something coming my way that I, quite honestly didn't figure out and come up with a solution
Right.
written, formula myself.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things, and again, that's whether you are looking just, have a family, give birth to your children, or, have your family through adoption, but just really coaching people through this um, experience of really understand why it is you want to have a family and be at peace with yourself as a whole person. Because at that point, I think, Michael, is only when we're able to truly, and sometimes I'll get a little emotional now, to truly be compassionate and empathetic to a birth mother, to a child that you're raising through adoption. Because, a birth mother is making the hardest decision, she may ever have to make in her life. And just being able to hold space for her and being able to be that person, to support her. And it's not somebody to fear, and it's not somebody to look at other than with the highest regard,
Yeah.
because of the choice that she's in. And I think sometimes in years past, um, when we didn't talk about birth mothers and we didn't talk more about their stories and more about that they didn't give away their
Sure.
children, right? That we didn't have that language, and we, it was more of a fear because, um, you know, a million things could come to mind, like why would I let my children meet their birth mother? What if they like their birth mother better than me? What
Right.
if
Yeah.
what if they could relate more? What if what if your child feels more complete because they had that opportunity to meet their birth mother?
Mhm.
And what if having their birth mother be an extraordinarily healthier person and be more complete for meeting them? What if that happened?
Yeah. That's powerful. That's really powerful, Francine. So 2 years into this process now, how have things shifted or changed or evolved in how you go about working with the business? Is the process changed as you've learned more about kind of running a business solo yourself to now, 2 years in? It doesn't seem like a crazy long time, but I know as a business owner, that's a lifetime and a half in there.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, I have to say, thank goodness that I've been able to bring in some support for marketing. Social media is, it's like the necessary evil, but it can be all consuming. So I'm really grateful that I have resources. I'm still a solopreneur by myself, but to be able to tap into marketing resources have been phenomenal. To be able to tap into streamlining, like through QuickBooks and just some basic accounting stuff has been phenomenal. I was an English communications major. I'm a people person. I am not a business,
Yep.
but it's been great because it's this opportunity to force myself to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, and do things in that nature. So, the day-to-day operations, of if it were me, I'd love to just be writing and teaching, writing and teaching, writing and teaching. But then there's all these other things that need to get done in order to be able to reach the people you want to reach. So it's been a healthy growth and challenge for me. From an adoption standpoint, which I wasn't expecting, is from me as an outsider looking in, or as it, yeah, from an outside looking in from a social media standpoint, I found that the adoption triad, when we talk about the triad, it's the birth family, adoptee, adoptive family, and I find it to be pretty siloed. Like adoptive moms are talking to adoptive moms on social media,
Mm.
adoptees are talking to adoptees, and birth moms are talking to birth moms. So one of the things that I'm looking to do and that I'm really excited about is to bring people from each of the silos together in conversation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole family, like it doesn't have to be the actual birth mother and the family and the adoptee and the adoptive mom, but just in general, can we come together? Because I believe we have more in common. We're more
Sure.
alike than different in terms of those conversations. And I think in bringing the conversation of all three perspectives together, I think there's this incredible opportunity for growth and for movement in how people perceive adoption. So, for example, I had an opportunity for Mother's Day to be on a podcast. It was myself as an adoptive mom, a birth mom, and an adoptee. We're on
Wow.
a podcast, right? And we're all moms now, and we're all moms. And Mother's Day hits us all differently,
Mhm.
but the same in many ways. And I just think that if I can bring more conversations like that to light, I think that will help improve and grow the perspective or the impression of what adoption means today.
Yeah.
That, birth moms, share your stories, talk. We want to hear from you. Adoptees, share your stories. I'm sorry if you didn't know what you should have known then, but what do you know today and how are you going to move forward? And adoptive moms, you know, you struggle too, possibly with infertility. And some people choose adoption as their first option to grow their
Mhm.
family. That's very common too. It's not always a second choice or it's at the same time. But in any event, recognizing that adoptive mom, you struggle too with infertility and you have loss in your story and so on and so forth. So that to me, from a business standpoint, from a soul fulfilling standpoint, I feel I can really take my HR background, which was always, HR's role is to listen and understand the business the objectives and the mission and the vision and where's the company going, and then listen to employees. Are you challenged? Are you enjoying your job? Are you satisfied in your benefits and your compensation? And then bringing those two together to fulfill the mission of the organization. And I'm seeing that now within the adoption space, that if we come together and show how we are more alike than different and bring a common voice to the table around adoption, I just think that that can just only grow and improve the adoption conversation going forward.
That's beautiful. I love that direction of just connecting all the different people together from their different experiences. That can only be a net positive for everybody. I think that's great.
Absolutely.
So,
That's my hope.
Francine, this has been a blast. I got some rapid fire ones just close. This has been a deep conversation of a deep topic right here. We're gonna lighten it up a little bit with some here. Some are
Okay,
goofy,
bring it.
but just always like to close these out. So, early riser or night owl?
Early riser.
Okay. Is there a favorite hour of the day?
Oh, when it's super quiet, like first thing in the morning.
Okay. Like 5, 6? Is that your
Well,
time?
don't get crazy. Like 4 a.m. I get up at 4. Now, like 6 a.m. when you could, it's just quiet.
That's a good one. Perfect. Window or aisle seat?
Oh, window.
Okay.
I need a
Sweet or savory?
sweet.
Sweet. Okay. Uh, we talked about favorite stuff. Do you have a guilty pleasure? Is it a book? Is it a movie? Is it a crazy snack?
Oh, guilty pleasure. We're not supposed to feel guilty. See, this is where I have, my Catholic guilt. I am not about Catholic guilt. I am not a guilty Catholic girl. Guilty pleasure, guilty. I probably would say, sweet tooth, ice cream, licorice. If somebody, you don't have to ask me kind of twice. I
Yeah.
kind of just will, yeah.
Well, are you a Stewart's ice cream? Are you Ben and Jerry's or
I would say Stewart's, black raspberry on a sugar cone with sprinkles, to be exact. So if
okay.
you were looking to get me something, it would just be a scoop of black raspberry on a sugar cone with chocolate sprinkles.
Okay. Rock on. Got to try the caramel chocolate tornado. So
Oh,
it's my
that
guilty
sounds
pleasure.
I got to remember that. That's a long name to remember. Wow.
Um, what's something that you've recommended the most to people? Maybe a book, maybe a movie, maybe a restaurant.
The power of prayer.
Okay.
The power of prayer.
I love it. Okay. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. Gosh, that's a good one. And now I'm supposed to give a fast answer as fast
I
as you
say these
asked
are
that.
kind of, they call them rapid fire. They're really not, but they're more,
They're
yeah.
really
I
not. This
haven't
is
figured out a
like
better name for it.
the best the best advice I've ever received. Gosh, I have to believe the best is yet to come.
I love it. Okay. What's the worst advice that you've ever received?
Nothing's going to change. Everything's going to stay the same. Why bother?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
All
because
right.
I will
Yeah.
bother.
All right. My last one I like to close out with, who inspires you the most in your life right now?
My children, they're my inspiration for the
Mhm.
future.
Love
And
it.
they are the biggest soul-filling supporters. So,
It's
and for that,
beautiful.
I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah. Francine Apy. Francine, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast connecting with you and hearing the journey that you've had and the work that you're doing. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it, Michael.
No doubt. If people want to check out more of the work that you're doing, check out everything you got going on, what's the best place that we can direct them?
Sure. SoulFillingadoption.com is my website, and I'd love some extra, followers on my Instagram, SoulFilling by Francine Apy. But SoulFillingAdoption.com will get them to learn everything that I'm doing.
Perfect. Francine, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some great value from this episode and a little more insight into some inspiring work happening right in this town. If you want to know more about our guests' work and check out more of what they are doing, please click on the links in the show notes below. And along with that, check out the direct link to 5-Minute Mindset. This is a 5-minute video that gives you the 2 best practices that you can do every day in 5 minutes that will create a major impact in your mental strength and resilience. If you are on your own mission to become physically and mentally stronger, these practices will be a serious game changer for you. Seriously. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll see you on the next one.